Hi, future pharmacists, and welcome back to All About Rx. I am seriously excited to guide you through this material today. As you already know, understanding anatomy is absolutely fundamental to your success, whether that's crushing it on your exams or actually applying it in your future clinical rotations. So let's just dive right in, shall we? Think about this for a second. The central nervous system, or the CNS, is quite literally our body's master control center. You've got the brain up top calling the shots and providing the commands, while the spinal cord serves as this vital, high-speed communication pathway. It's the ultimate command and control network of the human body. And honestly, really getting a grip on its architecture is your very first step in mastering neuropharmacology. So, in today's explainer, we're breaking down the gross anatomy of the brain and spinal cord. Picture the brain as this highly protected fortress, guarded by the thick skull, the meninges, and a cushion of cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. Meanwhile, the spinal cord is the cylindrical structure that is just absolutely essential for relaying information back and forth between the brain and the rest of the body. Together, they form this incredibly secure, highly organized system. Here is our quick game plan for today. First, we'll hit the major brain divisions. Second, the spinal cord and meninges. Third, we'll tackle the 12 cranial nerves. And finally, we'll wrap up with a quick recall review to lock it all in. All right, let's get into Section 1, Major Brain Divisions. Because the brain isn't just one giant uniform mass, right? It's functionally divided into 4 key regions. Let's start right at the top with the cerebrum. This is where the heavy lifting happens for our highest functions, and it's split into 4 distinct lobes. You've got the frontal lobe, which is responsible for motor function, planning, and speech, specifically housed in Broca's area. Next is the parietal lobe, handling sensory perception and your spatial awareness. Moving down a bit, we have the temporal lobe. This area manages hearing, memory, and language comprehension, which you'll find over in Wernicke's area. And finally, tucked at the back is the occipital lobe, which is entirely dedicated to vision and visual processing. Okay, so moving deeper beneath the cerebrum, we reach the diencephalon. Think of this as the ultimate relay and regulation hub. It's made up of 4 key structures. First, the thalamus. This is your brain's primary sensory relay station. Literally all sensory signals bound for the cortex pass through here, which means, and this is key, a thalamic stroke can lead to massive sensory loss. Right below that is the hypothalamus, which handles autonomic and endocrine control. It strictly regulates the essentials: body temperature, hunger, thirst, and your circadian rhythm, mainly by bossing the pituitary gland around. Then we have the epithalamus, containing the pineal gland, which secretes melatonin for those sleep cycles. And finally, the subthalamus, essential for fine motor modulation. Next up, we transition down to the brainstem. This is the crucial connector between the brain and the spinal cord, and we divide it into 3 parts. Up top is the midbrain, handling visual and auditory reflexes. The pons sits in the middle, acting as a major relay station between the cerebrum and cerebellum. And at the very bottom, we have the medulla oblongata. Now, really pay attention here. The medulla contains the absolutely vital centers for respiration, heart rate, and blood pressure. Because it controls these fundamental keep-you-alive functions, any lesion in the medulla can be instantly fatal. Sitting right behind the brainstem is the cerebellum. Now, to easily remember what it does, just use the memory hook CAMP. It's super simple. C stands for coordination of voluntary movement. A is for ataxia, which is the huge risk of jerky, uncoordinated movements if the cerebellum ever gets damaged. M is for regulating muscle tone. And P stands for posture and balance. Keep that CAMP mnemonic in your back pocket and you'll nail any cerebellum question for sure. Moving right along to Section 2, the spinal cord and meninges. We're officially leaving the skull and traveling down the central superhighway of the body. The spinal cord itself is divided into exactly 31 total spinal segments: 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal segment. Now, each of these segments gives rise to 2 roots. You have 1 dorsal root handling incoming sensory information and 1 ventral root which drives outgoing motor commands. So dorsal equals sensory, ventral equals motor. Understanding this strict division is absolutely crucial when you're trying to diagnose exactly where a spinal injury has occurred. But just like the brain, the spinal cord needs some serious armor. That protection comes from 3 distinct layers of tissue called the meninges. To remember the order from the outside moving in, we use another handy mnemonic, DAP. D is for dura mater, that's the outermost, really tough, fibrous layer. A is for arachnoid matter, the middle, delicate, kind of web-like layer. And P is for pia mater, the innermost, very thin, highly vascular layer that hugs the nervous tissue directly.
Okay, listen up because this brings us to an incredibly high-yield clinical pearl. When a patient needs a lumbar puncture, or an LP, to sample that spinal fluid, the needle absolutely must enter the subarachnoid space. Clinicians typically perform this lower down at the L3, L4, or L4, L5 vertebral level. But why? Well, it's because the actual adult spinal cord ends much higher up, around L1, L2. So by inserting the needle below that point, you ensure you safely access the CSF without running the risk of literally poking and damaging the spinal cord itself.
Let's move to Section 3, the 12 cranial nerves. These 12 pairs of nerves are unique because they arise directly from the brain and brainstem, completely bypassing the spinal cord. And for exams, you absolutely need to know whether each of these 12 nerves carries purely sensory fibers, purely motor fibers, or both. Luckily, there's a classic, totally unbeatable mnemonic for this. Some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. The first letter of each word maps directly to the nerves in order from 1 to 12. S means sensory, M means motor, and B means both, which, we also call mixed nerves. So for example, nerve I is olfactory, mapping to the word some, meaning it's purely sensory. Nerve V is trigeminal, mapping to butt, so it carries both sensory and motor fibers. Seriously, memorize this phrase, jot it down on the top of your scratch paper on test day, and you will lock in those easy points. Now, moving beyond just what type of fibers they have, let's look at what happens when the wiring actually gets crossed with some high-yield eye and face pathologies. If a patient comes in with a cranial nerve 3 or oculomotor palsy, you're going to see a classic down and out resting eye position, and usually it's accompanied by a dilated pupil. On the flip side, damage to cranial nerve 7, the facial nerve, results in Bell's palsy. This presents as a pretty severe droop affecting the entire unilateral side of the face. And importantly, that includes the forehead. That forehead involvement is the dead giveaway that helps you differentiate Bell's palsy from a stroke. We also need to highlight some major ear and organ associations. Cranial nerve 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve, handles both your hearing and balance. So damage here, that can lead to sensory neural hearing loss or intense vertigo. But perhaps the most clinically expansive nerve of them all is cranial nerve X, the vagus nerve. The vagus has the absolute widest distribution of any cranial nerve, acting as the critical parasympathetic control for your heart, your lungs, and your gut. It is literally everywhere. All right, finally, Section 4, our quick recall review. We have covered a lot of ground today, so I highly recommend that you hit pause right now and grab a screenshot of this master cheat sheet. It perfectly summarizes the brain divisions and cerebral lobes, reinforces our C and AMP mnemonic for the cerebellum, outlines those DAP layers of the meninges, and recaps that crucial cranial nerve mnemonic we just went over. Testing yourself on this exact summary before your next exam is going to drastically improve your retention. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. Which of these clinical anchors, whether it's the lumbar puncture safe zone, that classic down and out eye of a CN3 palsy, or the massive reach of the vagus nerve, which one are you going to rely on most during your next pharmacy rotation? Because at the end of the day, anatomy isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about translating those facts into real, impactful patient care. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep that focused learning going.